Live show, part of auburnlive.com on 3 Sports Network. Appreciate everybody for joining us. We are back with the one and only Rob Pate, who is a longtime friend, contributor of the site, is going to be with us all year writing and his weekly columns, and of course part of the show as well. Rob, what's up? How was your summer?
Summer was great. It's been busy. A lot of volleyball, a lot of AAU basketball, which is that's cruel punishment. That's if you don't know the Lord and you end up in hell, I've got to believe that there's some kind of AAU basketball tournament being played in hell at infinitum. That is unbelievable. But daughter got engaged. I got my oldest daughter is a senior at Auburn now. I've only got one more payment to make to the university, and I'll be free and clear there. So, and then my other daughter is going to play volleyball at East Carolina. So she's a rising senior at the high school, but she committed to the Pirates. So we'll be making a lot of trips to Greenville, North Carolina soon.
That sounds exhausting. East Carolina, by the way, I've never been there, but I mean that's a cool area. That's a nice campus if I've heard correctly, right? It is.
It's hard to get to. It's probably an hour and a half from just about everything. Flying to Raleigh and then drive about an hour and a half east. But yeah, it honestly reminded us a lot of Auburn. Had a neat little downtown. Had about 100,000 people in the city. Close to 25,000 undergraduate students, great facilities. And there's a lot of Auburn tie-ins, that's where Pat Dye was, that's where Hal Baird was. And so they take their athletics seriously. They play in a tough conference for volleyball. They're in the American Conference, which is being jostled around a little bit because of the Big 12. But yeah, she's excited. It's going to be a good fit, and she really felt at home. They recruited her really well.
All right, let's get into this. Auburn football getting cranked back up. Fall camp starting up on Friday. They practice Friday. They report Thursday. And so we'll have full coverage of that at auburnlive.com. Man, I feel like there hasn't even been an offseason barely. It's just been weird. I mean, we were covering coaching changes, a week out from spring ball. Or 2 weeks out from spring ball, and then spring happens, and then really you just had the summer. I feel like that went by quick, and then now here we are. It's just been I guess the off season was more hectic than usual. So we're entering year 2, right? So we did media days in Atlanta a week or two ago. We know the storyline out of that, right? Brian Harsin coming out and saying, the coup didn't work. We have people picking Auburn. The media picks Auburn last in the division. I've seen people predict Auburn to win 8 games. I've seen people predict Auburn to win 4 games. Kind of all over the place. Expectations outside of the program are low. So where do you start when you're thinking about fall camps beginning, what this season could be? Where do you even begin to sort of figure out, okay, what do I want to see on the field? Is Harsin's job in trouble? There's so many angles and so many variables, I think, that are affecting this season and affecting, the outcome. And there's a lot of questions, and all those questions can be answered a lot of different ways. So, where do you even start?
I think that, I start with, well, what did we see last year? I mean, how did these guys compete, and what did the initial Brian Harsin era look like? And, at the beginning, I think that there were a lot of really good things, a lot of positives, and these guys really fought hard and won some games and had we're in a position right there in October to make it a really good season. The way they finished was not ideal, obviously. I mean, for somebody that came in and preached finishing as kind of his calling card, and then to finish with 5 straight losses, you just can't have that. And I think that's what led to all of the upheaval. And so in a lot of ways, Coach Harsin has to look in the mirror and know that a lot of that was self-inflicted. Now, to his credit, he lost his quarterback. Okay. I mean, you don't lose your quarterback in this league and that just goes unnoticed. I mean, that's going to leave a huge hole. And that was a big issue. I mean, Auburn's offense totally changed when Bo Nix went down, and we just did not get the production that we needed to win football games. That being said, that team could have won every game they played. I know they didn't, and you can't sit here and go back and say, well, what could have, should. I mean, they could have lost the Georgia State game. I get it. But that's telling to me that even when these guys were outmanned against the Alabamas, some of the other close games that they lost, they could have won just about every game they played, minus the Georgia game. And I think that means a lot for a first-year coach. Here's the biggest thing. In my time when I played and just watching teams in this league, year 1 to year 2 is where you see the biggest jump. When a new coach comes in and takes over and has to put in a new philosophy, establish a new culture, working with, implementing offensive and defensive schemes. Quarterback play tends to take a step up that next year when there's a better understanding of what's trying to be done. So this team's got all the pieces in place to make it happen. The way their schedule sets up with 5 straight home games, with a quarterback that has veteran experience in this conference, with an offensive line and a defensive line that I think can compete with anybody. And I think that's the aspect that gets lost in all of this, is that Auburn's never going to get the benefit of the doubt up front. The way that we've recruited up front, and just Auburn in general being sandwiched between Alabama and Georgia, people are always going to cast an eye towards Auburn that just seems like they're just not a team that I want to elevate until I see it on the field. LSU doesn't deal with that. Arkansas right now is getting the benefit of the doubt. Even the Mississippi schools are getting the benefit of the doubt, in large part because the media likes their coaches. I mean, that's honestly what it is. But Auburn's going to be good up front, and that's where it's won and lost. I know that we've got some question marks in the secondary. I know we need a playmaker at wide receiver. But if you can do well and not lose games in the trenches, then you're going to be around to win all of them. And they'll be much better up front. And I think that's why you have the quiet confidence that's taking place with the people inside of the program, not because these guys are world beaters, but because these guys have played a ton of football and they've got a ton of continuity. And if there's one place you can ill afford to not know what the guy next to you is doing, it's on that offensive line. And, they've played a lot of football together.
Yeah, I think so. You said something that I've been thinking about for a couple of months. And it's so we can talk about the team a little bit. I do want to do that. But you said something that I want to just go ahead and talk about, which is where exactly are these low expectations coming from? Like, I get the question marks Auburn has, but there's some stuff being said and written about Auburn that seemed to me to be a little bit too far in terms of, there's people like saying that they'll be lucky to win 6. And there's just some stuff that I'm thinking, if you really look at the roster, I'm not sure, like, that seems like it's going too far. I'm trying to figure out, when I see people say they're going to win 4 games, when I see people predict Auburn to win, to be last in the division, and you bring up a good point. There's a bunch of schools getting the bit. Think about Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, LSU. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Every one of those schools is getting has some type of positive hype, whether it's the coach is funny on Twitter, whether it's NIL, South Carolina gets Spencer Rattler. Like, there's something that the media has attached itself to. And for Auburn, it's been all negative. You lose 5 in a row. You have the Harsin drama, and then you have recruiting, which is very slow right now. And so I've thought about this last couple of months, and I really, really believe that there's just a bunch of negativity in people's minds about Auburn that's seeping its way into the prediction for the season. And I don't think that they're the same. I think that when you look at Auburn and the roster and the schedule, which is really hard, but you do start off with 5 in a row, so that at least gives you an opportunity to build some confidence and to get off to a good start. I think if you just take that by itself, I think that the expectations for Auburn would be different. But people are letting maybe their negative thoughts. I mean, I could go all the way back to how the media viewed Harsin and COVID. All of that stuff is still in their mind about what they think about him or the program or whatever. And it's just affecting how they're looking at this team a little bit. And so I definitely, that's why I think they're just, I think what Vegas is predicting 5.5 wins for Auburn, maybe 6, something like that. 5.5, they're going to go over that. So anyway, I think that's been an interesting thing to watch where Auburn's predicted and what's going into that. I think there's a lot of outside stuff that's affecting people and how they're looking at it, combined with a bunch of positive hype around Mississippi State with Will Rogers coming back, Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin and all that hype. Arkansas and Sam Pittman has a quarterback coming back, and they win 8 games. Tennessee's, their offense was fantastic last year. They're doing good things in NIL. They have a quarterback coming back. And so there's positive things to look at to create hype around all these middle programs. And then because of that, Auburn now is just being placed behind this group, where in the past, Auburn would get the benefit of the doubt over Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Kentucky. Like, Auburn would be above all those teams. But the SEC become tougher, and Auburn took a step back, and then all the drama. And so the next thing you know, now you got Auburn being positioned behind all these teams that are in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's just an interesting dynamic. I think saying that, it's a massive, massive year for Auburn football. I don't want to overstate it, because I do think with NIL and the transfer portal, you can make up ground quicker, plus recruiting. There's more opportunities to go get an impact player with NIL. Hey, we need somebody. Let's go get this guy, or the transfer portal. And the same thing, NIL comes into play there. But it is a massive year for Auburn football when you look at the positive momentum around some of these programs in the middle of the league and where Auburn's at, and kind of where people are looking about Brian Harsin. And it's just a really important year. And I don't know if that means that Harsin has to be have a fantastic year and right the ship. I don't know if that means I don't know what it means. I just know that this year, one way or another, Auburn can't lose ground. I don't know. I mean, people could look at that and say, well, hey, let's just get a new coach after this year. Maybe that's not losing ground. I don't know, but it feels like a very pivotal year for Auburn football with everything going on and where Auburn's at. It just feels really significant. It is.
No, it is significant, because you're at a precipice right now where it could go either way. And you said it, as far as it's all perception. So much of it's perception, built off of the things that you named. The recruiting, that hasn't been spectacular. It hasn't been bad. It just hasn't been as good as our neighbors. The coaching upheaval and the things that went on with the boosters and the administration. I think people just see disarray. They see mediocrity. And they wonder if Brian Harsin is even a cultural fit, if he's accepted here at Auburn. What type of culture is he? Do the people that have to make the big decisions with money and involvement in keeping players on campus and getting players to campus, do they even support Brian Harsin's program enough to make that happen? So they see all that. Plus, Auburn lost its quarterback, and it looks like a total implosion. But even at that, Justin, all the teams that you just named that are those middling programs fighting to work their way towards the top of the West, Auburn beat all of them last year. They beat LSU, they beat Arkansas, they beat Ole Miss, they beat 2 of them on the road. And they were up by 4 scores to Mississippi State.
Lead to Mississippi State,
and so that's kind of the hard part about being an Auburn fan, is that you've got to have a stiff neck. You've got to understand that the people in this state and the people to the state next door are going to write divisive after divisive columns and things about your program, because it sells papers, and you're a whipping boy for 2 big states that enjoy the football to the points that they do, and Auburn is looked at as a program that needs to be belittled and put in their place, and so Auburn has to fight that perception locally. They have to fight that perception nationally. And that makes it a difficult place to be a fan of, and to recruit kids in and maintain that level of continuity. If you're not on the inside and seeing how how it's all put together. So I think he's done a really good job, honestly, of culture change. I mean, to just flat out say it. I mean, he's got kids that when he had as many guys as he did decide to come back and play a fifth or sixth year of college football, that was eye opening to me, because most of those guys don't do that. Several of those guys already have their career plans in place and could go out and start working and start their lives right now without going through the rigors of college football. They don't have to do it. And they chose to because they see something in him that they admire and they believe in something that he's selling. And, so that is going to be important. That is the impetus that creates a culture change within your program. And I think that's going to be what pushes them in the right direction. The recruiting will come. I don't get as concerned about recruiting as most people do, because I don't think it's as much about recruiting as it is roster management. It's about filling holes and needs. And with the transfer portal, you can do that now almost better than you could with high school players. I hate that as a parent, as a kid that just went through recruiting, and to see coaches say, well, I'd rather have a kid that's already had 2 years in a college program. I get it. But at the same time, you go back and you look at Auburn's recruiting, and so often we wouldn't keep our top kids in the program long anyways, or we'd have the 6th ranked class in the country and half of them would transfer out in a year or two. So being able to bring guys in like a Zach Calzada, guys that can come in and compete, like the safety from Iowa State that came in. They get edge guys like Eku Leota. They get the kid from Tennessee that's from down the road in Roanoke. All those guys can come in and fill needs, and that's gotten to be just as important. And they've done a really good job in that realm.
All right, so I think you and I are on the same page in terms of the first 22. Auburn's going to be competitive. They're thin. Look, I think the thing that could implode this season is injuries. There's not a lot of positions where they can afford an injury. Like Derek Hall can't get hurt. Owen Papo can't get hurt. Tank Bigsby can't get hurt. There's positions they just can't. If those guys get hurt, offensive line, they've probably got 7, but there's some key guys that can. So injuries could implode this season really quickly. Having said that, I think first 22. We feel like Auburn's competitive enough to be in a lot of these games and have a better season than people think. So we're entering fall camp. What do you want to see? What are the things you're watching out for? You mentioned culture change. I think we're on the same page there as well, and we've talked about that a lot at Auburn Live. The culture is definitely different. I mean, I've talked to too many people at this point. It's unquestionably different in terms of the focus of the players, the attitude. It's different now. Now you got to go practice and win games. It only goes up to a point. We're at that point now where that's all great. Now go do it. Like we're at that point to stop talking about culture change. It's a foundation. It needed to happen, but now you got to put it all together. What do you want to see in fall camp? Like what are some of the storylines, whether it's position battles, whether it's something you want to hear from a coach? Like what do you want to key on?
The first thing is I want to see development at linebacker. So I think that's going to be a huge issue for this defense to be able to solidify that middle linebacker presence, to be the link from the front end to the back end. But we had tremendous play there over the last couple of years. Zakobe Mclean became one of my favorite players ever at Auburn, just by the way that he totally abused his body, could care less about the repercussions of running into guys far bigger than he was, and just came and played lights out. I don't ever remember the guy being injured and missing games. I mean, he was just an animal. So trying to replace a guy with that type of production and that type of just leadership on the field, I think that's going to be hard. We got young guys that can step into that role, and I honestly think, that's another roster development thing where you go get the guy from North Carolina, Asante Samuel, that comes in and has some experience and maybe can jump into a role and provide some of that depth. But linebacker is going to be critical. Also, making sure you've got some safeties that you feel like can mesh well. In the secondary, I feel like we've got a really good group to pull from. You've got some guys that have played a lot of football at corner. You've got a safety that's played a lot of football. You've got a young safety or two that have all the athletic traits that you look for, the intangibles, the work ethic. They just don't have the experience. But you could bring along a safety. I mean, that's the least of my concerns from a defense. Trying to have safety play that can. I mean, I know from experience, you can come in and play early and get away with a safety as long as he just plays smart. And then probably the biggest thing is development at wide receiver. I mean, being able to have a guy that you can trust on third down to get open, somebody that can just you can count on. I feel like we've had too many critical drops. We've had nobody to really fill that void probably since Seth Williams left. And just need somebody to be able to take the reins there and be a true playmaker, a difference maker for this Auburn offense. And, everything else I feel pretty good about. I mean, the line we already addressed on both sides. The quarterback play, I think, will probably be an improvement for what they want to do offensively. The tight ends are loaded. The defensive front is loaded. And the edge position, like you said, an injury or two could create havoc. So, got to be smart with how they practice in the fall and make sure you get to game one healthy.
Yeah, I mean, all the attention obviously is going to be on the quarterback battle. We know that. I've written on the site numerous times that I think Zach Calzada is a heavy favorite for a lot of reasons. We'll see how it plays out. He's got to win the job. But I just think there's a lot of reasons why he's the heavy favorite. We'll see how it goes. I think if I had to point somewhere with this team, you mentioned linebacker, that's one for sure. I mean, I like the potential of Cam Riley. Wesley Steiner's a really vocal, smart guy, kind of like a Deshaun Davis, a little undersized, maybe height-wise. But linebacker's one where you kind of want to see those guys, make plays in the game. But it really comes down – I think this team completely comes down to the offensive line. They're a veteran group. But having said that, they were a good unit last year. They weren't anything special. I mean, against the better teams, you go look at Tank Bigsby's numbers against the Georgias and Alabama. They're not great. So that line has got to take all that experience, and they've got to take a next step in terms of production.
Yeah.
If they can do that, if they can go from a pretty good unit to if they can become like one of the top 4 units in the league, then that changes this team dramatically because that helps your receiver issue, right? So if you don't have that playmaker at receiver, if that line is doing like that, you can run the ball a little bit more. It helps that. You've got Tank. It opens him up. It helps your it just helps everything if that unit can take the next step. If they're just pretty good again, then Auburn's going to be in a lot of these close games. If they can take a next step, I really think they can – with Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter back there, and then you got tight ends, you can run play action. It really can elevate this team to another level that I'm not sure. I don't know that another position group can do that. I mean, like Zach Calzada is a good player. The offensive line to me is probably the most poised to make the biggest impact on this team if they take the next step.
Yeah, and I think that the coaching staff has to do a better job this year of helping them take that next step. And I'm not talking about fundamentals and just getting stronger and just, bullying guys around. I'm talking about just setting them up for success with the way they call a game. Yeah. I thought that Mike Bobo could, he and Harsin could mash an offense together and make that work. And it just never really came to fruition. I'm hoping that the better continuity that these guys have, and you could see this coming when Coach Harsin announced his staff last year with the addition of all these guys that had coordinator experience that were kind of guys that he had had previous experience with. Yeah, we took 2 coordinators that had Georgia and Vanderbilt SEC experience, but we landed on 2 guys that are from his region, speak his language. That he has a lot of comfort with. And so I hope that we see that come to fruition this fall. But, in order for those guys to be able, the offensive line to be able to get to the next level, we got to be able to pass the ball better. I mean, we got to be able to hit some of those deep shots. We got to have a receiver, like we said, step up, several of them to keep the chains moving. Because you watch any of the teams that we would look at and say, well, these guys can run the ball. They've got great offensive lines. They can just pound it whenever they want to. They can, but not when everybody knows you're going to run it. I mean, That's why you get in these big games and You stack the box. You're going to say, "Hey, I'm going to make you throw it to beat me," and they do. They spread the defense out. They dink and dunk. They use misdirection. They use the bootlegs. They hide the ball. They make defenders run the length of the field, sideline to sideline, to tire them out, and then they start running the football, and they mix it in with a good solid passing attack. So, we just have to be balanced and properly use those tight ends, and be able to get those guys in position to be successful. Because you're right, they're not going to be a group that just out dominates defensive fronts in this conference, but they can be a group that you can win with if you play it smartly.
Yeah, I love the potential of Killian Zaire. I love the potential of Keandre Jones. I think those two guys have got, NFL ability. I think they've got ability, certainly in the SEC. They've got the ability to be really good, to be all SEC type players. Those are two guys I'm looking at that have got the size and athletic ability to take a next step and become guys that can mash people, move people.
Yeah.
Zaire, I think, is Auburn's best pass blocker. I think everybody else there is pretty solid. Those two, stand out to me. And maybe even see you got some young guys that could step up, like Cam Stutz, going to be competing. But Keandre Jones and Killian Zaire are two guys I'm looking at. If they step up and raise their level, the whole line raises their level of play. And you're right about look at the games last year offensively. It's hard to not go back to the offensive line when you talk about the inconsistency. Look at the offensive performance in the first half against Ole Miss and the second half. Look at Mississippi State first half, second half. There's some of those games where they're just the inconsistency on offense, and it's hard to not point to the line as one of the big reasons why. They couldn't sustain the same type of things all game once teams got used to it. Okay, can we just run the ball? Can we? And it became tougher. And so the line has got to sort of take that over and become consistent all the way through. What are your expectations for? You mentioned Schmedding and Keesaw. Those, I think it's like wildly. Harson's gotten so much attention because of everything that's going on. Very little talk about Keesaw and Schmedding and like what we can expect. And even when people talk about Auburn and the expectations, I don't get the sense that they're thinking negatively about Auburn because of Schmedding and Keesaw. Like, I think it's a whole bunch of other things that they're looking at. We talk to them, we'll talk to them as camp opens, but what are your thoughts on those two guys taking it? We obviously know Harson's going to call a lot of plays. Harson's going to control that offense as much as Keesaw, but Schmedding coming over and coordinating the defense, two guys who haven't done it in the SEC. You go from, like you said, a bunch of SEC guys to two coordinators who've never done it in the SEC. Yeah. Any concerns, or you think it'll be all right?
We'll start with Schmedding. I like Coach Schmedding. I think he's going to do fine. I see very little, the language and lingo will be the same. I don't think there's going to be a lot of, things that these guys are going to have to take a step back from and reinstitute or go over or change, their techniques. So that part is, I think, easy. He can adapt to what Coach Mason had verbalized with these guys. And of course, it's going to be his defense with his fingerprints all over it. But I think that these guys, you're not going to see what happened against Mississippi State happen again. All right. Where you just make no changes. You just can continue to rush three guys. He's going to bring some pressure, and he's going to be multiple. And, all the things that I read and hear from other coaches, he's extremely well thought of and a really smart defensive football coach. So I think that part will be fine. Over with Coach Keesaw, all I can say about that is that I can only pray that my children's career path is up and to the right like this guy's has been over the course of the last couple of months. He goes from analyst to receivers coach to offensive coordinator just like that. It's unbelievable. I pray that that my children have that type of success. I don't know what to think about him. Honestly, I don't know much about him. I never listened to any of the podcasts that they put out, so I haven't heard him speak or his philosophy. All I can go on is that I'm hoping that the continuity that he shares with Coach Harsin and the philosophical sameness that they have can just create a better identity for this offense and can give Zach Calzada or whoever wins the job, the belief and the trust and, just set them up to be successful. But he seems like a smart guy. Brian Harson's banking on him because he needs to win a lot of football games this year. So he must trust him and really think highly of him. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think thinking back to what he was when he talked about Keesaw, I think he praised Keesaw for being a really organized, detail-oriented guy. And so maybe those two guys can come together and how Keesaw organizes his thoughts and coordinates the offense and things like that. Harson's more the play caller, and you combine those two with obviously they have a relationship, and it could be. And there's potential there for it to work really, really, really well.
Yeah. Now I'll say this too, Justin. I think Coach Harson's going to have to get better too in in-game decision making. All right.
Yeah.
You go back to how we finished that game at Penn State. You go back to, hey, if I'm the head coach and I'm watching three guys rush Will Rogers for nothing, and they're just zipping up and down on me, something changes there.
Yeah.
Some of the decisions against Alabama, as far as you go going for two or things like that, to try to put that game away. I think he's got to improve some. And I think that was a steep learning curve for him in this conference. But it's not just about recruiting for him that where they have to make sure that they're not giving up ground. He's going to have to make better in-game decisions if they want to win some of these close games too.
No, there's no doubt about that. There was a lot of things that happened during games that made you scratch your head. And that could have gone the other way. And so maybe that was a deal of just first year, a lot going on. Not maybe in the best frame of mind during games. Maybe he'll have more clarity in terms of during the game and the kind of decisions he's going to make. And
there was something.
Maybe he trusts Schmedding and Keesaw more, and so he doesn't. Maybe last year was a little hesitant with Mason and Bobo. Yeah. Like they're good, but I don't know him. Should I? Who knows?
Yeah, there was something else that happened in so many of our games that I noticed almost the whole year that really put the offense behind in field position and really hurt this team more than I think we probably even discussed. But
I know what you're gonna say.
On special teams, on kickoff return, we had an inordinate amount of penalties. I mean, I've never seen a kickoff return team have really good returns that would be pulled back for holding or blocked below the waist or whatever the infraction was, to the point that I almost think Coach Harsin felt like, man, they're like these officials are out to like get me for like they've honed in on this for some reason on just our unit. Because I don't remember that ever happening to any of the teams we played on their kickoff return team. And man, you start every drive from behind the eight ball. I mean, that's an offensive possession you take away from just about every game. And so the penalties are going to have to get better too.
Yeah, and see, you started saying that, and I was thinking, where are you going? And then it hit me. I was like, yeah, they did have a lot of penalties on
they had a bunch
on kickoff returns. Special teams should be pretty good this year. Oscar Chapman at punter, Anders Carlson coming back, and then, of course, McPherson, the freshman kicker. We'll see if they split up duties, kicking off and field goals, but special teams should be pretty good. Got some guys that I think they can put back there at punt returner to make plays. Maybe it's Javaris Johnson, somebody like that. And you've got some speed at kickoff returns. So special teams should be fine as long as they don't keep committing those penalties.
No doubt.
Well, I think just kind of tell people, so we'll get into fall camp. We got, I guess, the first game a month away. And so we're going to do these every week. So for those that are new to this, Rob has been writing for us all last year, wrote the column. He's going to start joining the show once a week, and we'll be talking sometime middle of the week. We'll be sort of recapping the game that was, talking about the game that's coming up. And then, of course, Rob will write his column on Fridays. We'll put it up where he's just previewing the game. It's always a really, really good read from a perspective of a player that's you can't get it unless you played in the SEC. You don't understand the perspective that Rob brings. So that's going to be awesome. But I guess what are your sort of final thoughts as we get fall camp here rolling? Is there anything that you don't want to read, you want to read? Like what's the thing that if you see it, you're just going to be more excited, less excited? What are just kind of your final thoughts?
I'm obviously, we talked about injuries. We can't have that. Don't need any distractions, whether that be something the administration does or doesn't do, whether that's a player that wants to transfer. You just need good continuity. You need everybody pulling in the same direction. And, you don't want to have to fight those battles inside your locker room and even for the coaching staff out in the media. I hope that we see a quarterback rise up quickly and take the reins. I don't think that you want to enter the first game still kind of searching for your guy. You want it to be obvious and go ahead and build your offense and your game plan and your structure around that guy. And he's the most important link that you've got, and your team's going to rise and fall with him. So go ahead and get that established and let everybody know and work that out. And then everything else is just effort, attitude, and hopefully that they can get some recruiting momentum. And I do think that will pick up. They're not going to be ranked the last team in the conference when they have a full class. I mean, but again, like I said, I do think that they look at the transfer portal a little different and value it. Maybe to a degree that makes us uncomfortable because of what that looks like when we start comparing our classes with some of the others. But it's just all about roster management. And in this day and age where kids leave at the drop of a hat, it's you just never know. So I think they've done a good job of piecing things together year by year to have a productive, to have a chance to have a really good team. And, they had that last year and didn't finish it. We'll see if they can rectify that this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun and fascinating fall camp in one of the more fascinating, I think, Auburn football seasons in quite a while. I think the impact of the season, college football wise, I think Auburn and what Brian Harsin does this year it's one of the bigger stories in college football, I think. And so because it could just go a lot of different directions for a lot of different reasons. So we'll see how it sort of plays out. All right, Rob, appreciate it, man. Everybody go to auburnlive.com, subscribe. 1 year, $1 right now. I didn't make that decision.
Wow.
On3 made that decision. That is stealing. And I don't know how much longer they're going to do it. But with fall camp starting, if you don't go sign up for $1 for a year, then I don't know what to tell you. You are an incredibly stingy person when it comes to money. It's $1. I'll pay it. If you just are just like, golly, I'll pay it. I will do it. AuburnLive.com, go subscribe. We'll be doing this every week. And then once the season gets going, Pate's Perspective column will get rolling. We'll come back in a week. Auburn camp will be going. Let's see, by the time we talk next time, they will have practiced probably 3 or 4 times. And they'll probably be in pads for a day or two or something by the time we talk again. So it's here and here we go. And it's going to be a really interesting and exciting fall camp. Appreciate everybody joining us. AuburnLive.com. Go subscribe to the YouTube page as well, where you're finding this. Make sure to subscribe so when we put new videos up, you see it and you're notified of it. And we'll catch you again in a week. See ya.